So let's start with a short meditation. And as our motivation for doing the meditation, just as we recited in the prayers, see if you can feel the wish that this meditation will be beneficial for as many beings as possible, all living beings if possible, to bring them happiness and peace, help them be relieved of the suffering and the causes of suffering that they are afflicted by, and help them awaken to their true nature and eventually reach that state of full awakening or Buddhahood. So in this meditation, we'll continue with the practice of concentration or calm abiding. And concentration is already something in our mind, but it's not yet well developed. So we can only stay concentrated on an object for a short period of time, a few seconds, a minute or two. But it's possible to build up our ability to concentrate so we can have it for longer and longer periods of time. We could think of it as a bit like a muscle. We have muscles in our body, but they may be kind of weak and flabby. But if we go to the gym and work out, we can develop those muscles. They become stronger and bigger, more able to help us do things like lift heavy loads and so on. So we can think of concentration as being like a mental muscle. And before we try to develop it, it could be kind of weak and flabby. But we can train that muscle by practices such as what we're doing here. Train our mind to stay focused on a chosen object and bring it back and try to stay with that object longer and longer periods of time. So in that way, it's a bit like being in the gym, working out the concentration muscle. So gradually over time, it will get stronger and we'll find our ability to stay on the object for longer and longer periods of time. And part of that process of building up the concentration muscle is being able to notice what hinders our concentration, what takes our mind away from the object. So yesterday we looked at 5 hindrances. These are among the main, most important factors that take our mind away from the object. So as you're meditating now, see if you can have one part of your mind, like a corner of your mind, just watching the mind itself, alert to what is going on in your mind. And just in a gentle way, see if you can notice if any of these hindrances, I'll mention them again to remind you, attachment or desire for sensory objects, malice or ill will, a kind of anger, which can also include feelings of irritation, dislike, annoyance. And then lethargy and sleepiness, dull state of mind on the verge of going to sleep. And then restlessness and regret, a very restless, agitated state of mind. And finally, deluded doubt. So mainly keep your attention focused on your object, but just with a little corner of your mind, a bit like a security guard standing in the corner of a bank, looking out for troublemakers. Have this little part of your mind just watching, trying to notice if any troublemakers come along to disrupt your concentration. And you may not yet be at the point where you can actually deal with the troublemakers, the hindrances, but just being able to notice them, recognize them, is already a very important first step. So be content with that, and then just bring your mind back to your object again and again whenever it wanders away. Okay, so this is our last session, and I've got some more things to talk about, and then I'll leave some time at the end. We'll extend this session a little bit so that you have a chance to ask questions. Some of you may still have questions you'd like to ask, so we'll try to take care of those. So, first I'll talk about a few other problems that can occur in meditation which aren't on the list, like pain. I probably should have talked about that earlier in the retreat, but there were so many other things to talk about. But pain is quite a big one. And one of the best explanations I've come across on dealing with pain is in a book called Mindfulness in Plain English by Bhante Gunaratana. He's a Sri Lankan teacher who's been living in Virginia, I think, for many years. West Virginia? Okay. Anyway, over there, that side of the country. For many years, teaching meditation. There's also many books of his teachings. So in that book, Mindfulness in Plain English, there's a section on pain. And he says, first of all, try to eliminate the causes and conditions of the pain as much as possible. So go to the doctor. There may be something medically wrong, and that can be treated. So go to the doctor, get medical treatments, take pills, try to deal with the pain on that level. And then there could also be other causes and conditions, such as clothing that you're wearing. It's recommended to not wear tight clothes, tight pants and belts and so on. That could be a cause of pain. Wear loose clothing. Then you could also look at how you're sitting, your posture, and what you're sitting on, cushion, chair, and so on. So you could experiment with different postures, different cushions. Some people like high cushions, some people low, some hard, some soft. So every body is different. So experiment, and hopefully you'll find some way of sitting and some kind of sitting equipment that you're able to sit with as much comfort as possible. But then, even having done all of those things, there could still be pain, and it's universal. Yeah, so don't think you're the only one who's got it. Everybody has it, but of course, some people may have it more than others. And in fact, just as an aside, Alan Wallace, who has also been teaching a lot of meditation, in particular calm abiding, he says you don't even have to sit. If sitting is too painful, you can lie down. He has some of his students who can't sit comfortably, so he teaches them meditation lying down. There, the danger is staying awake. But it's possible. You can work on that and be able to stay awake and alert, even he calls it the supine position. Yeah. And I met a woman a couple of years ago who said the only posture that's comfortable for her is standing up. So even lying down is painful. Only standing up, she's without pain. And that's fine too. You can meditate standing up. So feel free to go beyond even the sitting posture and try, I don't know, standing on your head. Maybe that wouldn't work very well. But anyway, it could be lying down or standing up. And also, I don't see them here, but some people use this little bench, a kind of bench, special meditation, where you don't even have your legs crossed. If cross-legged position is uncomfortable, that's another alternative. So experiment with that. And hopefully you'll find some way of sitting or standing or lying that you can use for meditation that's not too painful for you. But then still there could be pain, at least sometimes when we're meditating. So he recommends using pain as the object. I mean, the main practice he's teaching is mindfulness. And with mindfulness, you're using not just one single object, but many objects, whatever's happening moment by moment. So he said, if there's pain and it's taking your mind away from your meditation object and you can't ignore it, then you can make pain your meditation object. Focus on the pain. And he says part of the problem is tension. There's physical tension in that area. So he says, first, focus your mind in that area and relax the muscles. The muscles around that area might be tight. So relax those one by one. And that could probably relieve quite a bit of the pain. And then he says, relax the mental tension. The mental tension is attitudes like, oh, this is terrible. I don't like this. I don't want this. A kind of aversion, resistance, self-pity, all kinds of stuff can go on in the mind about the pain. Try to let go of those attitudes and just go right into the pain itself and observe what's actually going on there. We don't have time to go into it, but it's a really interesting practice. I've tried it a few times myself, and I've also led it in groups. And some people have said, wow, my pain went away. Because what you do is you get into this place where the pain is, and you can see, because it may appear like a solid block, a concrete block of pain, unbearable pain, terrifying pain, But when you actually go into it and explore it, you discover it's not so solid. It's impermanent like everything else. It's changing and flowing. And I tried this once when I had a headache, a really bad headache that had been going on for a couple of days. And I was trying to go to sleep one night. And I couldn't go to sleep because of this pain in my head. So I tried this practice. I just focused on it with mindfulness and observed what was happening there. And it became really fascinating. I got fascinated because I could see, it was pulsing and tingling and, coming and going. And it was just like, wow, this is really interesting. And then before I knew it, I'd fallen asleep. And then when I woke up, it was gone. So sometimes it can work, sometimes not. So try not to have expectations. Oh, this is going to make my pain go away, thank goodness. So try not to have that kind of expectation. But it's worth a try. And it could have surprising beneficial results. And then he said, once you've, learned how to do this with physical pain, you could also use it with mental pain, psychological pain. Just kind of going into it. Don't be afraid of it. Don't have aversion for it, but just explore it. Go into it and see what's actually there and see the impermanent nature of it. And that could be very helpful, even if it doesn't go away, but your ability to manage it, to handle it, might improve. It's not so bad. So that's one suggestion, but feel free to experiment and hopefully find other ways of dealing with pain. And also one other thing to share with regard to moving during meditation. Some traditions, like I've heard, in some Zen traditions, you're not allowed to move. You're supposed to just remain still and moving for the whole session. And in our tradition, at least what I've learned from my teachers, they don't say that. It's okay to move. They say it's important to be comfortable. So it is okay to move your position, change your position if it becomes too uncomfortable. But it's not good to move too much, especially if you're trying to develop calm abiding, because what we're trying to develop is a very calm and still state of mind. And because our body and mind are interconnected, when our body moves, our mind moves. Yeah. So it will have an effect. If we move our body, it will have an effect on our mind. So from that point of view, it is good to try not to move too much. So what some teachers advise, and I think this is really a good idea, when you're meditating and you feel the impulse to move, your body's kind of saying, I want to move. Ignore it. Don't do it. Just keep going. And then if it happens a second time, your body's saying, I want to move. Again, ignore it. Just keep sitting there. And then the third time, by now maybe it's screaming. Third time you can move. So that's a kind of a compromise between moving constantly every time you feel like moving and never moving at all, which could be like torture. And what might happen is if you ignore the first impulse, that it might go away. It might pass and you don't need to move. Or the second. But what was I going to say? I forgot. Yeah, so in this way, using that advice, we're learning discipline. We're learning to discipline our mind more rather than just every time we feel the impulse to move, we move, which is, I think, probably people's normal. If you kind of pay attention to your body, like right now, we're not meditating right now. We're, you're listening to the talk, so it's not so disciplined. So if you just kind of pay attention to your body, you might notice your body's kind of moving. Every couple of seconds, there's some movement happening without full awareness. And it's probably because whatever position we're in is a little uncomfortable. So we're trying to adjust to some other position to be more comfortable. So this is our habit, moving a lot, almost constantly. And so it's good to learn a little bit of discipline and not move every time we feel like it, because it's not always really necessary. The experience we're having may not be that bad, that unbearable, that we have to move to get rid of it. So by waiting till the third impulse before you move, you're becoming more mindful and able to see, well, do I really need to move or not? And just learning a bit more discipline. So that's another thing, another piece of advice regarding pain in the body. Sometimes the pain isn't really that bad, and it could be our mind is just freaking out, making a big deal out of something that isn't such a big deal. Okay, another problem is noise. So here is relatively quiet, but when you leave here and go back home, the place where you live, there may be a lot more noise. And actually, noise itself isn't a problem. The problem is our mind, how we deal with it. Okay, so one thing that happens is irritation. No, I don't like that noise. I don't want that noise. So we get irritated, angry. And that's the hindrance number 2, malice or ill will. It's kind of low level, but it could get big. I mean, if your neighbor's making noise and you get irritated and you don't deal with that irritation, it could build up until the point you're at the point of wanting to go out and yell at him or punch him in the nose or something like that. So it could become actual ill will, malice, harmful intent, if you're not careful. So that's one thing that could happen is irritation. So that's a hindrance. That's one of the hindrances. So try to just notice it. Don't identify with it. Just say, oh, there's irritation, and go back to your object. Yeah. And maybe you could also apply, if that doesn't work, you could apply some loving kindness or use some other technique. I just remembered one time when I was doing a retreat, and it was a relatively quiet place up in the mountains. But on the other side, there's a valley, and then on the other mountain over there was a road linking a few villages. This was in the south of Spain. And it was really far away, and I couldn't hear the cars. Trucks I could hear, but motorcycles, they were really annoying. when a motorcycle was going up that hill, because it's going up, so it takes a long time to get up there, and then it turns and goes up. So it was quite a long period of time of this sound of the motorcycle, and this was coming into my meditation and disturbing my mind. And after a while I realized this isn't, I can't stop the motorcycles. I cannot go over there and tell them to stop riding up this road. So that's impossible. But I can do something about my mind, about the way that I'm dealing with that sound. And so what I came up with was I would just wish them well. I would think, I hope you have a nice day. I hope you drive safely and don't get into an accident and reach your destination happily and safely, something like that. So I used loving kindness, wishing happiness for those guys or girls or whoever they were riding the motorcycles. So that was something that worked for me, to just stop the annoyance that was coming up. So feel free to experiment and find some way of dealing with noise. Or like yesterday when we had this hornet or whatever that was flying around, you could be irritated about it, but being irritated isn't going to do any good. It's still going to be flying around up there and we can't catch him. But we can generate loving kindness. May he, I guess they're he, she, okay. He, she, it, whatever. May that being be happy. May they be happy. May they be happy. So something like that, just generating loving kindness. And that takes away the irritation, because you can't have both in the mind at the same time. When there's loving kindness, there's no anger or hatred or irritation. Or just notice it and go back to your breath. It's a noise. It's just a noise. Let it go. Don't be bothered by it, and just keep coming back to your object. So if there is something you can do about the noise, like if there's a door banging in the wind, okay, it's fine to get up and close the door so it stops banging. Then go back to your seat. So if there is something you can do to stop the noise without doing anything harmful or unethical or illegal, you can do that. But in some cases, there may not be anything that can be done. So then all we can do is work with our mind, change our mind about it. You can also buy these Bose earphones. If you have the money, they're expensive. Okay. So, yeah, if you have other problems you'd like to ask about, we can do that later. First, let's look at this other list on page 4. So here we have a list of 5 faults, and there are 8 antidotes. So this list of faults and antidotes comes from the traditional Tibetan teachings on calm abiding. It's either specifically about calm abiding. The other list of 5 hindrances is also in the Tibetan tradition, but it's in common with the Pali tradition and the Chinese tradition, so it's more universal. Also, I think that previous list of 5 hindrances, these are kind of more gross, coarse kinds of hindrances, especially for people who haven't really tried meditation before, and their mind is still very much caught up in these kind of things. So it's good to know about them and learn how to work with them and manage them, get them a little bit tamed, before we can really get somewhere in our meditation. But then, with regard to calm abiding, these 5 faults are the specific ones that interrupt the practice of calm abiding. So I'm only going to talk about the first 3 mainly, because the last 2 aren't really problems until you get to much higher levels of concentration. So I did mention the first one already, laziness. This is where we don't feel like meditating. It's just a kind of reluctance, lack of interest, lack of enthusiasm to practice meditation. And there are 4 antidotes to laziness. First is, they use the word faith, But it's more like confidence, I think. Confidence in the good qualities of concentration. So I went through those yesterday, I think, just being knowledgeable about what are the benefits, the results that you will get by training your mind in concentration. So if you think about those, meditate on those, get familiar with those, hopefully that will build up enthusiasm to want to go for it, want to achieve those good qualities. So once you have that confidence, then number 2, you will have aspiration. I want to have those good qualities. And then that will lead to the 3rd one, joyous effort. Joyous effort is taking delight, feeling happy about doing it, feeling happy about sitting down and trying to meditate, doing it with enthusiasm, not, with dislike or because your teacher's going to yell at you if you don't do it or something like that. Fear. So this is the ideal state of mind, joyous effort. And also on this point, just to share something else that I heard from Ajahn Brahm, he said it's really important to be happy, have a happy mind. Happy mind, and I think he said, the Buddha himself said this, a happy mind is easier to concentrate. So it's important to look after your mind, your mental health. And if you notice your mind becoming unhappy, grouchy, depressed, irritated, and any of that kind of on the side of unhappiness, do something about it. Don't let that carry on and get worse and worse and worse, because that, again, could be a hindrance to your practice. And it's not that difficult to get a happy mind. Just gratitude. Gratitude is one easy way. There's a lot of talk these days about gratitude in contemporary popular psychology. They're finding that it's such a beneficial state of mind just to feel grateful. Just that we're alive, We're still alive. So many people, I think about this. I'm 66 now. I think so many people didn't make it this far. So many people died before they were 60. So like my nephew, 32 years old. He's half my age, almost. And he's already dead. His life already ended. And so many other people die of heart attacks or accidents or, so many causes of deaths. Some people just die in their sleep. I know a couple of people, they weren't old. They were like in their 40s. And they went to sleep and they didn't wake up again. And they weren't sick. There was nothing wrong with them. They just didn't wake up. So there's so many causes of death, so many things that could happen to us every day of our life or every night. Even when we're sound asleep in our comfy bed, something could happen and our life could end. So, that alone is something to feel good about, to feel grateful for. I am still alive. If you were almost in an accident, a car accident, or if you're on a plane and it starts shaking like crazy, and you start thinking, we're going to go down. So then if you get through that and you're still alive, you feel, oh my goodness, I'm so grateful to be alive, right? Have you ever had that feeling? Yeah? Well, we could feel like that every minute. We should feel that way. Just grateful to be alive, grateful we haven't died yet. We still have our life. And also grateful that we still have eyes that work. We can see. So many people lose their eyesight, even children. Some people are born blind. They never have the chance to see. So the fact that we have eyes that can see, ears that can hear sounds, our brain is working. That's another thing that could happen. We could be brain damaged and become just like a vegetable, hardly a human being. We have our arms and legs and hands and feet. We can walk. We can use our hands. There's, just simple things like that we tend to just take for granted. I do this. Maybe you don't, but yeah. So just reminding ourselves of those things and just feeling grateful to be alive, grateful to have food to eat, grateful to be in a country where we have freedom to do things we want. We can meditate if we want to. We can learn Dharma if we want to. We can go skiing if we want to. We have nice people around us, family, friends. So just looking at these things in our life, the good things in our life, and feeling grateful. So that's a relatively easy way to get yourself out of a negative state of mind and be happy. And then the fourth antidote is pliancy. Bottom of page 4. Pliancy. This is the actual antidote to laziness. When we attain calm abiding, we feel relaxed and blissful in body and mind. So we really enjoy meditating and no longer have trouble with laziness. Yeah. So that's said to be the real antidote, but you can't expect that to happen right away. We have to work for it. But it does build up. They say we can start to feel little tastes of pliancy as our concentration gets better. And so then in a way, it's like then you get little tastes of the benefits of meditation. And when that starts to happen, it becomes easier to meditate. You no longer have to force yourself to do it. You want to do it because you can see for yourself how beneficial it is. Then the second of the 5 faults is forgetfulness. And we did talk about that as well. That's when we forget our meditation object. We lose it, we drop it, we let go of it because we wander somewhere else. And it could also mean forgetting the instructions on what we're supposed to do. So we need to keep those in mind. What am I supposed to do here? What am I doing here? Okay. And the remedy, antidote to forgetfulness is mindfulness. Mindfulness is this mental factor that it's memory. It's basically memory, remembering our meditation object and not allowing our mind to forget it and go to other objects. So again, I think mindfulness is a natural part of our mind, a mental factor that everybody has. For example, I'm not sure if this really is mindfulness, but this is what I think of as an example. I mean, we have responsibilities, right? Some of you probably have kids you have to take care of, look after, be there for, and you have a job, and you have a dog to feed or a cat to feed or something, a house to look after. So we have these responsibilities. So mindfulness enables us to keep those in mind so that we don't forget them, we don't neglect them, but we do them. We carry out our responsibilities. So I think that's mindfulness, and it's something that plays an important role in our life. In our everyday life. If you didn't have mindfulness, you'd forget to feed your dog and forget to take your kids to school and forget to show up for your job at 8 o'clock in the morning or whatever. So life would be pretty chaotic if we didn't have mindfulness, if we didn't remember what we're supposed to be doing in our life. Okay, the third of the faults is actually 2 in 1. Excitement, also called restlessness, and then laxity. So over on page 5, we have explanations of these. These are said to be the main problems we have to look out for and deal with when we're trying to develop calm abiding. So excitement in this context is a mental factor that makes the mind restless and unpeaceful and causes the mind to be distracted to attractive, pleasant objects it's attached to. Okay, so our mind can get distracted to lots of different kind of objects, including virtuous objects, thinking of our teacher or thinking of the Buddha or whatever. And then we can also think of our enemies, people we don't like, and get all caught up in anger at them. But here, excitement here is specifically attractive objects, which is probably the most frequent cause of distraction. Thinking about things that we are attracted to, that we find pleasant, that we want to dwell on and, try to get some pleasure from. So probably, my guess for most people is when our mind does get distracted away from our meditation object, it's because of this, because of attraction, attachment. And that there are two levels. The first is gross. This is when the mind completely loses the meditation object. It just completely goes away from your meditation object to this object of attraction. And then subtle excitement, this is where we're still on the object. Your mind is still paying attention to your object, but a subtle part of the mind below the level of conceptual thought is moving toward an attractive object. So some of you may have noticed this. You know, you may be focusing on the breath, but there's this other stuff going on under the surface. They say it's a bit like a river running under ice. Yeah. You're thinking about things. Yeah. So you haven't totally lost your object, but there's this other stuff going on. So that's subtle excitement. And so when we're trying to deal with excitement, we first need to deal with the first one. Try to keep the mind on the object. That second one, the subtle one, is going to be there for a while until, I'm not sure, I can't remember now which level, which stage of calm abiding you've overcome that, but that will still be there. So don't worry. Yeah, if you're noticing that, it's actually a sign of progress that you notice that. And also the fact that you are able to keep your mind on the object for a period of time. Don't worry if that other stuff is going on. I mean, eventually, of course, we want to be able to stop that. But you're not going to be able to do that for quite a while. So if you can at least keep your mind on the object, that's already fantastic. Okay, laxity. This is a lack of clarity or vivid intensity in the way the mind apprehends the object. It's described as an internal distraction. So this is where our mind is just not bright, clear, alert. And again, it has two levels. The first is gross. So in this situation, our mind is on the object. We're able to stay focused on the object. But there's a lack of clarity, as if you've walked into a dark room and can't see things clearly. So your mind is kind of dark. Yeah, it's kind of sunk a little bit, sunk down, not bright and clear. So this is a much more subtle kind of hindrance than excitement. So initially, when we're first trying to practice, we're going to have to deal with excitement. That's more of a problem initially. But later on, when concentration gets better, it said laxity is the main thing we have to look out for and work on. Subtle laxity, there's stability. The mind is stable on the object. There's clarity. It's clear, not dark. But there's a lack of vivid intensity. And I think this is quite hard. I don't feel confident in myself that I'm able to actually recognize this, but you probably do start to notice it later on when your mind is more concentrated. Concentration is strong, the mind stays on the object, and the object is clear, but the focus is not fine. Maybe it's a little bit like if you're looking through binoculars or a telescope and it's a little bit fuzzy. I'm guessing it's like that. You know, it's not like super sharp, clear, but kind of fuzzy. It happens because the mind has lost a little of its energy and thus has relaxed the strength of its hold on the object. So instead of holding the object tightly, it's become a bit relaxed. When there's no subtle laxity, so without subtle laxity, the mind adheres to its object but remains fresh, sharp, and energetic, and retains the fine focus, which gives intense clarity. So they actually say that some meditators who've reached a point where they have really, really good concentration, but they don't recognize this one, and they're actually stuck in it. And they may even think they've achieved calm abiding. So this one is very, very tricky to be able to recognize and deal with. So it said the antidote for both of these, excitement and laxity, is called Introspective Awareness. Other translations are just introspection. I think that's the one Alan Wallace uses. Vigilance is another translation you sometimes come across. So this is a mental factor that watches the mind and checks to see if it has lost its focus on the object or if it has come under the influence of a fault, such as excitement or laxity. It can be compared to a security guard whose job is to look out for robbers and so on and stop them from making trouble. So this is, earlier I was mentioning, try to have a little part of your mind, a corner of your mind, watching the mind itself, looking out for trouble. So we do have the ability to do that while looking at our object, focusing on our object. At the same time, one part of the mind, because the mind is actually a complex thing, there's many parts to it. One part of the mind can be watching the mind itself, checking, am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing? Is there excitement? Is there laxity? Is there attachment? Is there ill will? So just looking out for faults, similar to, a security guard standing in the corner of the bank and just looking at who's coming in and out and what they're doing and looking out for trouble. So that's, and it's said that when we have mindfulness, when our mindfulness is there functioning, introspection, this mental factor, will come as a side effect. So that's how we have introspection. With good mindfulness, they're like friends. They come together. They're a duo. Introspection will be there, watching to see if our mind is in the right state or not. And then when we do, if we do notice any of the faults, we need to apply antidotes. Don't just let it be. Like a security guard in the bank, if a robber comes in, pulls out a gun and, asks for the money, and the security guard just stands there watching. Yeah, I'm watching. But that's not all you have to do. You have to stop the trouble from happening. You have to deal with the trouble. Yeah. So, so then you need to know what the antidotes are for these different faults. And the next of the fault is number 4, non-application. Non-application is if you have a fault like laxity or excitement or malice or whatever, and you don't deal with it, you just let it make trouble. That's the meaning of non-application. So then that becomes another fault. You're letting these troublemakers mess up your mind, mess up your concentration. And it can be compared to a mother failing to correct mistakes her child is making, such as playing computer games when he's supposed to be doing his homework. Right, so if your child is supposed to be doing his homework or her homework, but instead they're playing computer games, is it good to just let that be? No, because then they'd build up this bad habit. Yeah, and that will lead to problems later in life. So in a similar way, if there's some kind of fault in our meditation and we're just letting it be, not dealing with it, then, our meditation's going to be going in a not good direction. So it is important. If we really want to develop concentration, it is important to deal with the faults. And the antidote to non-application is application, which means, applying an antidote to the faults. So on the top of page 6, these are the remedies for excitement and laxity. So some of this overlaps the material we looked at yesterday, the 5 hindrances. So remedies for excitement. Excitement can be caused by trying too hard or being too tight, right? So if we're really pushing ourselves too hard to meditate, building up tension, that could be a cause for the mind getting excited. So an antidote is to relax, loosen your concentration. Don't be too tight. And if that doesn't work, then you can use other remedies, like things that will sober your mind, bring your mind a little bit down, because excitement happens when the mind is like too excited. So you need to bring the mind down a little bit so we could remember impermanence, death, karma, or suffering. So just for a little while, contemplate one of those topics to sober yourself. Another remedy is to count the breaths, focusing on the breath for a little while, if that isn't already your object. But if it is your object, then just really try to stay focused on the breath and let go of all this other blah, blah, blah. And then it says if none of these work, then better to take a break, do something physical, go for a walk, relax for a while, and then try again later. Because all of these problems, all the faults that we have in our meditation are not permanent. They're impermanent. They're transitory, things that come and go. And then for laxity, the cause for that may be the concentration has become too loose, too relaxed, so we need to tighten it up a bit. But then they say if you tighten too much, then that can lead to excitement. Then you have to loosen it again. So you need to balance tightening and loosening your concentration while holding the object strongly. So it's similar to if you play a stringed instrument like a guitar or a violin. I think it's called a key you use for tightening and loosening the strings. So you have to kind of play around with that, tightening, loosening, until the string makes just the right sound, the perfect sound, the beautiful sound. So actually this analogy comes from the Buddha. He used that analogy. He said, finding the right state of mind in meditation is like tuning the strings of a guitar. Not too tight, not too loose. If it's too tight, we have certain problems. If it's too loose, we have other problems. So we have to keep adjusting until we find just the right balance of tightness and looseness. And nobody can do this for you. Yeah. Unfortunately, not like we have a key outside of our head and Buddha can come along and so we have to do it ourselves. Okay, and then other remedies for laxity are meditating on things that will uplift our mind, like precious human rebirth, the good qualities of concentration, the good qualities of the Buddha, visualizing light. So things that are brightening and uplifting for the mind. And if that doesn't work, then again, you could take a break, go out, get some fresh air, put cold water in your face, look out into the distance or the sky, and so on. This is actually a really good place to meditate, because they say it's good to meditate in a place where you can look out and see a wide view, a wide vista. Meditating on the first floor of a 10-story building in the middle of the city would be a little difficult. You look out your window and you just see concrete and cars. So it's not so good for the mind. So it's really good for the mind to be able to have this kind of view. Look at the sky, the clouds, distant mountains, and so on. Tibet was a perfect environment for that. And then just briefly, the last of the faults is over-application. And this really doesn't apply until a much higher level. This is when your mind has reached a pretty good level of concentration and you don't have these faults anymore. You don't have laxity, you don't have excitement, but you're still applying the antidotes to them. Yeah, so you've kind of gone overboard. And it could be compared to the mother continuing to scold her child even after the child has stopped playing computer games and is now doing homework. Okay, so don't keep nagging your mind. If your mind is behaving, doing what it's supposed to be doing, then let go and just remain in a state of concentration. Don't keep applying the antidotes. Okay, so that's kind of a quick run through of some of the main points of the practice. And probably a question that is on many people's minds is, well, okay, now we're over. Now the retreat is over. We're going home. What do we do now? So it's up to you if you want to continue working on concentration, calm abiding. If you feel attracted to this practice, it's something you would like to do, you can continue even at home. It's said that if we really want to develop calm abiding, we're really serious about it, it is important to be in a specific situation. And this one point we didn't go through is on page 2, letter E, the 6 conditions for calm abiding. And so if you really want to get serious about calm abiding and go for it, then you need to have these 6 conditions. The first one is a favorable environment, which is one that is peaceful and quiet. There's good energy. It said if you can meditate in a place where others have meditated, like great meditators, like it had places like that in Tibet, places where Milarepa meditated or Lama Tsongkhapa meditated. So these great meditators that kind of left their energy there. So those are good places to meditate. But that's not always possible. But at least a place where there's good energy. Like if there's a place where a war has happened, a battle has happened, a lot of killing has happened, that's not so good. There could be some negative energy still in that place. So try to avoid that kind of place. Then letter C, necessities are easily obtained. You need to be able to get food and water and whatever you need to be comfortable. Letter D, conditions are clean and healthy. Ideally, food, water, air are healthy. And E, presence of good companions who hold similar views and do similar practices. I mean, there's some people who are really strong and they're able to just go off by themselves and be all alone in the wilderness, far away from anybody else, and do well in their practice. But probably not many are able to do that. Many of us would be lonely, bored, have a hard time. So it is helpful if you can be in a place where there are other people who are meditating. I mean, that would be an ideal thing, like a retreat center, a hermitage, where there are other meditators around who are meditating too. Just knowing that they are there, they are also meditating, is really, really helpful, supportive for you and your practice. It's also helpful to have someone who can go to town and do shopping for you, so you don't have to do that. Otherwise, that becomes really distraction. So that's more to do with the external situation. And then the others are more to do with your own mind and your life and your practice. Number 2 is reducing desires. Try not to have too many desires. So there we have to have that first hindrance a bit under control. Otherwise, you're sitting there and your mind is just thinking about all these things you want. Maybe I have to go to town today to buy this and that and da-da-da-da-da. So that's a big distraction. And number 3, developing contentment, meaning learn to be content with what you have. Instead of, I have a jacket, but I'd really like that kind of jacket. Maybe I'll go to town or I'll go on the internet and buy one and so on and so on. So being dissatisfied with what you have, even though it's good enough, and always wanting more and more and more and more. So that becomes another big distraction. Number 4, avoiding other activities. So, other activities can mean anything. Work, talking to people, going on the internet, going on your phone. If we do those kinds of things, our mind will have more material to think about when we're meditating and make it harder to concentrate. So it's ideal to not do any of those things. So that's why, if you really want to be serious about developing calm abiding, you need to be in a time in your life when you can just take off time from those other activities and just focus on your practice. It's not that those other activities are bad or wrong, it's just that they're distracting. They cause distraction and making it harder to concentrate. So you may have heard, I was going to recommend this book, those who are really interested in pursuing calm abiding. It's called Calming the Mind. And the story behind this book is in 1988, a group of people right here in Washington, in the southwest corner of Washington, a place called Cloud Mountain, came together and did a 1-year retreat. Some people did it the whole year, some people 6 months, some people 3 months. But it was a calm abiding retreat. So they took time off and just focused on calm abiding, practicing calm abiding. And they had this Tibetan Lama named Genlam Rinpa with them, and also Alan Wallace with them. And he gave teachings for the first couple of weeks, explaining the practice and answering their questions. And then he stayed with them the whole retreat, and he was there. Each person had their own room, and they were meditating on their own, but they could go to him for advice. So I really like this book because it's contemporary. It's a Tibetan Lama teaching Westerners, and the kind of questions they were asking are the kind of questions we would ask. And it's quite simple and very nice. So anyway, it shows that it is possible. Yeah, there are people who do that, who really decide, okay, that's him. And Alan Wallace, Genlam Rinpa has passed away now, but Alan Wallace is still alive, and he leads retreats in different places in the world. And you can attend some of his retreats, and that would be a really good situation for getting good experience of calm abiding. And then number 5 is keeping pure morality. It's very important to live ethically, at least keep like the 5 basic precepts. Any other vows or precepts that you may have taken, bodhisattva vows, tantric vows, and so on. So if we don't have good ethics, that becomes a cause for our mind to be disturbed in meditation. A really gross example, if we start hunting and fishing, there's a lot of mental afflictions involved with that. Desire, aversion, indifference to the suffering of others, and so on. So that's going to make disturbances in your mind when you try to meditate. So we try our best to live ethically. If we do make mistakes, we do unethical things, we can also always purify. There's the practice of purification, so we shouldn't get drowned in guilt and shame and all that kind of thing. Just purify and try to do better next time. And then number 6 is rejecting thoughts of desire for sensual objects. In other words, just really try to keep your desire under control, managed. Not suppressed. It doesn't mean suppressing it. Be aware of it, but use the antidotes. Apply antidotes to try to reduce your desire and not let that hijack your mind and take you away from your meditation. So this just briefly, those 6 conditions. So this is talking about a very special situation and time in your life, and most people wouldn't be able to have all these conditions. But that doesn't mean you can't do calm abiding meditation. So even when you go back home and maybe you have to go to work, you have family, you have friends, you can still do a session of practice once a day or more than once a day. First thing in the morning is usually best. It's more quiet, more peaceful, more conducive. You're rested if you had a good night's sleep. And even if you can only do 5 minutes or 10 minutes, it's still something better than nothing. So in that kind of situation, you probably wouldn't be able to go all the way to calm abiding, but you could improve your concentration. Alan Wallace says you might be able to get up to stage 4. Stage 4 is where you're able to keep your mind focused on your object without wandering away for the duration of your session. You manage to overcome gross excitement, coarse excitement. You still have subtle excitement, you still have laxity, but you can get pretty stable on your object, without having this kind of situation. But, so this is up to you. It's up to each person if you want to continue doing this kind of practice. It's good to do some kind of daily practice. If it's not calm abiding, it could be mindfulness, it could be Chenrezig practice, it could be prostration to the 35 Buddhas. There's so many different practices. So find one that feels right to you, feels good to you, you enjoy doing, and keep that up on a regular basis and keep coming back here. Or other places where retreats are happening, just to get a refresher. Okay, so that's enough for me. And we have a bit of time left if you want to ask questions. Any last questions, Matt?
I have two questions. The first one is I'm kind of hesitant to practice concentration meditation like before sleep because I don't want to associate it with sleep. Is that like a concern, or should I not worry about that?
What do you mean associate it with sleep?
Well, like if I'm laying in bed with the intention of going to sleep, it seems kind of silly to do concentration meditation then because I'm going to fall asleep. Like.
Well, if that's the only time of the day that you're doing the meditation, then that would be a concern. But if, like in the morning, when you get up in the morning, if you sit and try to do concentration meditation there, not with the intention of going to sleep, but, with the intention of developing your concentration, then I don't think that would be a problem. Because, in fact, meditation can be helpful for going to sleep at night. I mean, there are a lot of people who suffer from insomnia. And that can really mess up your life, because if you don't get enough sleep at night, then it's hard to function during the day, and it can affect your health and so on. So, if you do suffer from that, then doing some kind of meditation practice, focusing on the breath, for example, can help you to sleep well and then do away with those other problems of insomnia. So I don't think it's wrong to do that, as long as you're clear. That's your intent. Your intent is to help you relax before going to sleep, so you can get up and be refreshed and do what you need to do during the day. But like I say, it would be good if at another time in the day you do it with the intention of, developing your mind and working for higher goals.
I was also wondering how these 9 steps compare to the formless and form realm concentrations.
You mean the 9 stages? Yeah. So the 9 stages, we didn't go through all of them, but you can read about them in this book and other books. The 9 stages are actually preliminary to calm abiding itself. So calm abiding occurs after the 9 stages. See, these are like 9 steps towards calm abiding. And then once you've achieved calm abiding, you engage in further practices and meditations to achieve the concentrations and formless absorptions. And you can only do those one by one. You can't just suddenly jump up to number 4 or the first formless absorption and so on. You have to do them one by one. So it's a step-by-step process. So this is the start of it, calm abiding. Then on top of that, if you want to, you can achieve those other states.
When you have to change your method, since I can't measure like how many seconds I'm concentrating. I mean, I don't even, so how do I even know? So I just keep plugging away at it until I think I'm doing a couple seconds in a row, because I can't measure how much I'm concentrating.
So you're asking, how do you know the length of time you're able to stay focused on the other? Well, I don't think that should be a big concern. I don't think that's something you're concerned about. I mean, it is a way of measuring when you've gone from one stage to another. But one thing that I did was I just measured like how, I'm trying to remember now, how did it go? I think I figured that there's about 10 breaths in 1 minute. Yeah. If you're using the breath, it's a little easier. If you're using the Buddha, it's more difficult. But anyway, with the breath, I measured 10 breaths is about a minute. So if I could keep my mind focused for 10 breaths, that means 1 minute, 20 breaths is enough. So something like that. So you can get some idea. With another object, like I say, it could be more difficult, but it shouldn't be something you're like looking at the clock. Okay, how long am I? Yeah. It's just to have a rough idea of when you are progressing in your concentration.
You need to apply those antidotes, and if you need to change your method or something.
Well, the applying of antidotes is more when you recognize a fault. Your mind has wandered away to some object of excitement, or you're getting irritated or having doubt. So when those are there in your mind, you notice those, then you can apply antidotes to them.
You mentioned concentration was one of 5 mental factors. Can you tell us the other 4?
It's one of 5 object ascertaining mental factors. Okay. So there's many mental factors, and they're divided into groups. And one of the groups is called ever-present or omnipresent mental factors, which means those are mental factors that are there every single moment. And the object ascertaining mental factors, I forget how they're defined, but you remember, Pella? It has to do with, kind of analyzing objects. So the 5 object ascertaining mental factors are concentration, mindfulness, that's another one of them. One is called appreciation, sometimes it's called belief, aspiration, and wisdom or intelligence. So we talk a lot about wisdom. That's a very important mental factor we want to develop. So it's one of the 5 object ascertaining ones. It's hard to find material explaining the mental factors. In the book of Jeffrey Hopkins, Meditation on Emptiness, are you familiar with that? It's a huge book like this. But anyway, in one section in there, he does go through all the mental factors and gives some explanation about each one. So I'm sure that book is in the library. You could look it up there.
There's also a book by Geshe that's part of the FPMT course.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. He doesn't always explain all the mental factors, but that does have some explanation. There's another book by Geshe Rapton called Mind and Its Functions. Yeah, that's another really good one. Although they sometimes use different translations for the words, so it's a little tricky which mental factor he's talking about.
I had a question about, at the very beginning when we started, you made reference to the object, and you gave the example of first looking at a physical image and then having a mental imputation, which is what we wanted to focus on. And I understand that with regard to the Buddha, that's easy to understand. What would be the mental imputation for the breath itself? Mm-hmm. That was the question that I had.
Yeah. You don't find this information in the Tibetan tradition. It's in the Theravada tradition. Maybe because Tibetans don't usually use the breath, but they do in the Theravada tradition. So they say that you start off using the breath, which is a tactile object. We feel it with our body consciousness. And they work on that. And when your concentration builds up, gets to quite a good level, then there will just be a spontaneously arising mental image appearing in your mind. They say it's like a luminous shape. It's different for everybody. Not everyone has the same one, but it's something that will just appear in your mind, and they call it a nimitta or sign. And once that appears, then you use that as your object. It's like a mental representation of the breath. So you use that and continue cultivating concentration on that. So that's how it's explained. And in one of Alan Wallace's books, The Attention Revolution, he mentions that it could arise around stage 4 or stage 5 of calm abiding, but depends on individuals.
So after that mental image of the breath arises, you no longer stick with the physical breath. So the
That's my
physical breath
understanding.
will become not a matter of your concentration. It's just that mental one.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose you would, you'd still have some awareness of your breath happening, but that isn't what you're focusing on. You're focusing instead on this mental image. And they say when your concentration gets better and better, the other senses, I don't know exactly how it works, but they sort of become further and further away. And finally, when you have calm abiding itself, you don't even experience objects of the senses. They say even if somebody's beating a drum next to your ear, you don't hear it, because your mind is just so absorbed in your meditation object. The other sense consciousness is kind of absorbed, similar to what happens when we go to sleep at night. So at that time, you wouldn't even feel your breath. You wouldn't feel sensations in your body. You wouldn't hear sounds. It's only your object. Your mind and your object are just like fused. I mean, I'm not talking from experience, but this is what they say in the text. Yeah.
Thank you.